What's going on, everybody? It's Jonathan here. We're going to be talking about the Second Amendment today. So this comes in wake of the Virginia gun rally that happened yesterday on January 20th. Essentially, whenever you were leading up to it, you saw that the media was trying to kind of malign the rally. You saw these, reports and news like leading up to it of how, neo-Nazi and white fascist, far right, these militia groups are all coming. They're all descending upon Richmond. And really, and this is like something that, could be another topic, but this all kind of fits that narrative of how the media is like trying to create this like framing, and this like to create this mindset in people's head of like, when you think of gun advocates or, these pro Second Amendment, whatever, they're trying to like get that association between, guns and far right, Nazis, white nationalists, really the scum of our nation or really the world, and try to associate it with one of our fundamental rights as Americans. So like I said, this video comes in the wake of the Virginia gun rally, which, there was like roughly 22,000 people, I think like 6,000 like in the actual like Capitol and like 16,000 like around them. The 6,000 were allowed like to the Capitol building. And really this comes in the wake of the proposed gun legislation by the Democratic governor, Northam, who, piece of crap, but again, another conversation, but also the Democratic-controlled legislative body in the state. And their main thing was about the fact that they wanted to ban assault weapons, which is very, the catch-all, and the one that they always go to is the AR-15, even though it's a wide variety of guns. It's also the fact that they are wanting to like limit the magazine size to like 10 bullets per magazine, which isn't very big. And you can kind of see, because I was looking through their bill that was proposed, how they just like strike out and just completely change a lot of this, where it's not just before it was, if you're not a citizen you can't have a gun. Now it's you're just not allowed to have a gun at all. And that's throughout the whole state of Virginia. And this is also the response, because like a lot of people, online, they're kind of like, this is ridiculous. Why are so many people up in arms about this? And it's the fact that, and this is kind of the main point of the video, is why are people, conservatives, so against gun legislation? And the reason being, and the biggest point, is the fact that you give a little bit, and the Democrats want to take a mile. So, like I said, the goal is to completely ban guns of Democrats. And yes, it was always, under the Obama administration, they're like, you guys are being crazy, we need to at least have some sort of guns or restrictions. But that's the thing, is that even though the Democrats are saying nobody's going to take your guns, we want smart legislation. Because that's, again, the whole idea in politics is when you listen to politicians and the way and the specific words they use. They want to repeat over and over, smart, comprehensive. They want to make this idea that, hey, we're the good guys, we're making safe, smart, well thought out legislation. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm open to debate of, what can we do? For example, one thing that I'm actually am in favor for is if you have children in the house, you should be legally required to secure your guns. Now that is up to you. Does that mean putting a, timed lock on your door? Is that getting a safe? Whatever it may be. Because of the fact that most school shooters, on a statistical basis, are, people, specifically children, who take their guns from their parents or a relative or somebody else because they were, improperly secured. But again, that leads to the point of like, if we give that little bit, how much further? Because now, as you see in the Democratic Party, you're starting to see more, support for just straight up, assault rifle bans. And once you ban those, it's that slowly, like once you get the foot in the door is open, and it's not going to stop there. Because whenever Beto O'Rourke was still like running for president, there was like the famous, whenever he was like asking for ban guns, he's like, hell yeah, we're gonna take your guns. It's just like, see, you said the quiet thing out loud, and that's arguably one of the reasons why he's not in the presidential race anymore, among plenty of other reasons, is the fact that he kind of said the quiet thing out loud. Is that Democrats understand that if they want to ban guns completely, they need to take it slow and meticulous. Start chipping away slowly and slowly. And again, I'm not against, certain regulations on guns or whatever. However, I am also a very big, Second Amendment advocate where I'm like, you start talking about it, And it really goes to the point of they just want to ban it. I really want to stress that point. That's not just we want to put regulations. It's no, you want to ban it, or if you can't ban it, you're going to do everything you possibly can in order to make it, even difficult. Because the whole argument is like, why do we have guns in the first place? The biggest argument that you see, and probably the most palatable, is that, it's for self-defense. And that is a good reason. I mean, you have a gun. I mean, that's the greatest equalizer. Somebody comes into your house, 12 o'clock at night, you don't know who he is. And let me be clear too, is that most people who have guns do not want to use them. Nobody wants to use a gun to take another human life. It is more of a necessity, an evil necessity, that we even have this, or even want them. If we live in a world we didn't have to have guns, we didn't have to worry about people coming into your house, robbing or raping people and killing them, we wouldn't want guns for self-defense. Because you always say, and don't get me wrong, there are those, cowboys or whatever who's just itching, just waiting for the opportunity to, be a hero or some sort of vigilante and shoot somebody. There are those, but that is a small population of people. Those who want guns, more than likely, do not want to use them on another human being. Take them down to the gun range, have fun with your buddies or whatever, but they do not want to use guns on somebody else. Like, I wouldn't want to shoot somebody. That's terrible. To know that your whole life you had to do that. But more than that, it's the fact that we have these guns as a final check on the government. And again, you have those cowboys and you have those guys who are like, yeah, let's get it down, revolution. No, most people, again, do not want that. Nobody wants to have their country warring and fighting against their fellow neighbors or against their government. No, and again, very, very few people actually want that. Because again, like I said, the idea is it's a final check. Whenever the founders and the Revolutionary War happened, it was because they got to a point where they could no longer, through the legal means of trying to protest their government, trying to get them to roll back legislation, that their rights were, being stepped upon so badly that it's like, this is our final resort. That's what it is. It's a final resort. And you hear people talk about the idea of like, well, the founders, they didn't expect the guns we have today. There's no way. That's a ridiculous argument. Because think about the time of like when the founders guns were getting better. They understood that guns were getting better. They weren't using, and then it's a little bit better than like flintlock pistols, but they were getting to the point where they understood that guns were going to be better. And it was the idea that just because they weren't expecting the form that guns would take today, they understood that the guns that they had then were going to be better. And I want to stress that point because it's, you weren't expecting this or that, magazine capacity. That's ridiculous. And then kind of going to the point of like, whenever they, were fighting against the British and for their freedom, the revolutionaries, they were fighting with rusty guns, worn out, old guns, and realistically, if it wasn't for the French, and this is something that a lot of people don't talk about, if it wasn't for the French supplying us Americans with guns and ammunition, we wouldn't have been able to, I don't think we would have been able to fight the war and win it. We would have been able to fight it, obviously, but the chance of us winning, because we were ill-supplied, because they had rusty guns, like I said, is, puts the whole thing in, makes the whole thing debatable if we would have won or not. Because of the fact that it's like, they expected the guns that they had then, of the citizenry, to match the guns of the military, which were, they were fighting on equal playing fields. Now, am I saying that, everybody needs to be running around with fully automatic, AKs or whatever? I'm okay with a little bit of regulation on that one, and that's why we have the laws in the books. Most people agree, fine, whatever. But semi-autos, no. Because then you say, well, if you're going to fight the government, you have no chance. What's the point? What's your little, rifle going to do against tanks and jets? And that, again, is also a ridiculous argument. Could you imagine if the U.S. government just started carpet bombing cities, being like, well, there's enemy insurgents there. They're being rebellion. Gotta go crush them. Rolling in with tanks and stuff. It's not how that works. Because if the U.S. were to start using their, actual, military vehicles in their arsenal on U.S. citizens within the territory, it will be absolute chaos. And even those who may be, against the insurgents, we'll call them, or those, kind of rising up, and this is under the assumption that whatever the people are rising up against the government using their weapons that they feel is that, this is justified. This is the premise that we're going on. Because there is research in political science that does say that, with the better technology and with the better weapons that we have today, these smaller forces are able to actually hold up and, stand their ground against these stronger former military powers. You saw this in Algiers with, France over their occupation of Algiers. They weren't able to, it wasn't an easy fight. And once they were able to start, kind of like winning that fight, it was because they started using tactics where they would like cut off like sections of the, of the city, and like the main city that I'm thinking of, and like they would just take it block by block by block. Martial law, cut it down. Citizens got killed. No, that's the price of war. But eventually they ended up losing their territory of Algiers and lost the occupation just because of the fact that, the French citizenry, they didn't like that. They didn't like seeing on the news that the French military is coming in and just cutting down Algerian, citizens. And in the same way that you're not going to have the U.S. government being supported by the citizens when they're just cutting them down, mowing them down with, tanks and jets and whatever. You also see this in Vietnam. I mean, you had this ragtag force in Viet Cong able to stand up to the U.S., which was, only comparable to the, USSR at the time. And then, even now, current day, we have the war on terror that is still ongoing. And I understand that, these aren't perfect examples. There was obviously issues with the, Vietnam leadership. Do they really want to fight the war? What was the objective? Same with the war on terror now. It's the war on terror. We're going to end terrorism. There are other factors. But the important thing is that the U.S. military, the greatest and best fighting force on this planet, and they're still having issues with, having to chop off one head after another, because of the fact that the playing field is kind of equal. Now, in my last video talking about Iran, the reason that, we would be able to pretty easily stomp out Iran is the fact that as a former military power meets another military power, there are clear objectives. There are, who the combatant is. You can target those, sites or those assets or whatever. But with the non-formal combatants, who do you target? A whole city could essentially be enemies, but you don't know that. You have to go door to door to door, and if nothing, it becomes a point of just like it becomes too costly, if nothing else. And this is why, as citizens, like why we need to safeguard our Second Amendment and our gun rights is the fact that this isn't just some crazies or whatever. Like, no. Like, as, I do believe that, we're slowly giving away our rights for the sake of, a little bit of convenience and security. And, there's always that argument in, political thought of where's that balance between having security in your freedoms and, being able to just live a good life, because we could have, utilitarian society where the state just comes in and just governs everything and tells you yes or no, like what you can and can't do. But so the biggest thing is that going forward, we have to be looking at these, especially Democrats, with the proposed gun legislation. We have to safeguard it with everything that we've got. The founders knew what they were doing when they created the legislation, specifically the Second Amendment. And this is something that, as Americans, we need to hold, dear to our hearts. Thank you. Remember to like and subscribe and follow. And you guys have a good day.